It is 7 o'clock on a Sunday night, and you know what that means. It's Topical starts right now. A very good evening to you, South Africa, and those watching around the world. My name is Blaine Herman, and this is It's Topical, our digital audience with us tonight. It's so good to have them on the program. I'm looking forward to getting their questions for our guests in a short while, also getting their comments. The 11th of February, a significant date. Why? It's the 34th anniversary of Nelson Mandela's release from prison. He spent 27 years of his life split between Robben Island, Pollsmoor prison, Victivus there. What did that seminal event mean to you? We know South Africa is still grappling with issues of poverty, issues of inequality, issues which are often exacerbated by a high unemployment rate. But just watching these visuals back, does it give you a sense, a renewed sense of commitment to address these issues? Tintswalo, grace, the charming quality of being polite and pleasant, or willingness to be fair and to forgive. That's the dictionary meaning of grace. Question: the president's use of the analogy of Tintswalo during the State of the Nation address, was it a fair representation of the story of the first 30 years of our democracy? To what extent does Tintswalo's lived experience reflect yours? We will dig a little deeper, which leads us to the question of the week. And we're asking you, what's your thoughts on Tintswalo's lived experience 30 years into democracy, as expressed by the president during the State of the Nation address? Let us know at It's Topical SABC. Walk with me, let's get you some context as always. These State of the Nation addresses, how has the tone and tenor as well as the sentiment changed given the current political as well as economic realities on the ground? Please share your thoughts with us at It's Topical SABC. Perspective coming up. All right, let's get you some context. And as always, we turn to the magic wall. My guest tonight, Velemseni Mtiane, SABC News Specialist Researcher, joins us now live. Good to have your better mind on the program, sir. Thank you very much indeed. To be with you. Right, State of the Nation address, a number of issues that were discussed, right? But the use of Tintswalo as the analogy in terms of the reflection of the past 30 years of democracy. Talk to us about how did that analogy land? Intention, and how did it land?
Well, Blaine, I think the analogy of Tintswalo is left a little bit of a bad taste in many people's mouth, more so because so many people are still the recipients of grants. They do not want to be there, but they want to be able to be given opportunities to do better for themselves. I would like to speak, number one, on the point that the president mentioned, according to the World Bank report of 2020, where he spoke about the 55% of the poverty of the population of South Africa living in poverty. Is that an achievement? If you look at the resources that the country has, being the one of the most richest countries in Africa, to be at 55%, well, he can claim that it's a reduction from 71% in 1994, but there's still too many people living on poverty, and out of the 13 million people are food insecure. Right. That tells us that it can't be an achievement, whereas after 30 years, we're saying that we are lifting people up, but over 55% of the people are still under poverty. Another point I would like to touch on is the issue of the Tintswalo that is like perfect. If we look in terms of the unemployment statistics, those from the ages of 15 to 34, where Tintswalo falls in that age category, we are sitting on official stats at more than 43% of them unemployed. And as a result, if we look 10 years back, from 2013 to 2023, the number of unemployed graduates has doubled. And now we're currently sitting with 660,000 of graduates who could not find jobs. And I'm wondering, this Tintswalo that the president people spoke about, maybe I don't want to dispute that because so many people have benefited from the free healthcare, state housing, water and electricity, but it's, I'll dare to say it's a minority.
So yeah, this was the intention, right? To reflect what has been achieved. And no doubt, we have to be fair. There has been achievements over the last 30 years. But this is the challenges that Tintswalo and many of us are facing on a daily basis.
Let's pause there, because I just want to speak on the what is just spoken about. On the issue of load shedding, as we currently are, we're stage 6 load shedding.
Yeah.
It's very interesting that on the State of the Nation address, the President says he sees the light at the end of the tunnel. But we are currently on stage 6. And if you look and you listen to the energy analysts, they are telling us that despite pouring over 440 billion rands in taking Eskom's debt, they are saying there are no chances of saving Eskom. Right. And I wonder, last year, I'll give you stats for last year, we had more than 7,000 hours of load shedding. A year has more than about 8,600 hours a year as a whole. But last year we experienced, that's totaling about 9 months of load shedding, double that of which we have had in 2022. So the state of load shedding is getting worse and worse and worse.
Right. We're currently on stage 5. You heard what the Minister of Electricity had to say with regards to short-term pain for long-term gain. We'll explore that in a little while. Another issue that is part of Tintswalo's reality is that of crime. Right? Yeah. In particular, the issue of corruption. We heard the President talking about a plus minus or more than 200 people currently being prosecuted, more to come. Spoke about the freezing of 14 billion.
Good numbers, good numbers.
Big numbers here, right?
But there's something very interesting to mention here.
Go on.
That to have about 200 people being prosecuted does not mean conviction. And the speed of the prosecution needs to come into play. And then also, in terms of the report of the state capture, there are some people who are in his cabinet who have been implicated. I would even mention the names. Minister Zizikot has been mentioned there. Minister Gwedemantash has been mentioned there. There are many others within the ANC that have been mentioned. They're still working with the president. Right. And we are not too sure of some, if they are part of the list of 200 that are being prosecuted. So to say that these numbers looks good when you say 14 billion freezing orders, but have they been challenged, these freezing orders? They are not equally saying this is the cash that we've just recovered. Right. But we're just saying right now it's a freeze. The freeze can be unfrozen.
A very important point that you mentioned with regards to the 200 being prosecuted. Consequences, as we know, are in part a function of speed of process.
Absolutely.
So we'll see how far that goes. But this is what the President had to say with regards to that. Take a listen.
There have also been times when events at home have shaken the foundations of our constitutional democracy. Perhaps the greatest damage was caused during the era of state capture. For a decade, individuals at the highest levels of the state conspired with private individuals to take over and repurpose state-owned enterprises, law enforcement agencies, and other public institutions. We recall with great anguish the events of July 2021, when individuals loyal to their own interests sought to provoke a popular insurrection, leading to a tragic loss of life and widespread destruction. Again, they were unsuccessful. These efforts to undo the hard-won gains of our freedom failed because the people of South Africa stood firm together in defense of our Constitution and its promise of a better life for all.
Very your read on the President's words.
We have a blame syndrome in the country. If it's not apartheid, now
blame, not blame, yeah?
Blame, yeah, of course. The blame syndrome. What is interesting that there's been apartheid. No doubt there's been havoc there, but looking at now the state capture, almost every 10, whenever government is failing, they pin everything on the state capture. But now when you ask what are measures that have been put in place to deal with the after effects of the state capture, you realize that very little. The numbers that we have looked at, they are not impressive enough. But I also think that our government needs to go beyond the blame. They need to say, this is what we are doing. We have achieved this so far. So for me, the state capture, yes, it has impacted our economy. But one thing that the president has not spoken about in a while, the NDP goals. When he's addressing the nation, he's not telling us how far are we from achieving the NDP goals, which are idealistic. And once we reach them, then we would know where we are in terms of unemployment, where we are in terms of the service delivery, housing, where we are in terms of crime, where we are in terms of economic growth. Our economic plane has been said that it will grow at 1%. The IMF released a report saying that our economy will grow at 1%, a massive reduction of about 0.8 percentage points. They are saying is the issue of logistics. So now we've got electricity problem, energy supply. Now we have logistics problem. The mining sector lost billions because of the bottlenecks of logistics. So now you are realizing that there are compounding problems that the government must deal with and open up the economy so that there should be job creation and people can meaningfully participate in the economy. Social grants are good, but they are not the most desirable thing in an economy like ours.
Right, and something that the president pushed on, and it's debatable whether we got concrete plans in terms of the future, but logistics issues as well as energy issues. And he did mention a number of initiatives that are currently in place with regards to load shedding, tackling load shedding. But we're sitting now with stage 5 load shedding. This is why he says that there is light at the end of the tunnel. When you look at, building a 14,000...
Let me stop you right
there.
Maybe
it's sustainable.
Let me stop you right there. When did we start with load shedding? 2008. What did we do? We promised to build more coal-fired power stations, Medupi and Kusile. What happened with those projects? Up until some of them have not been completed. The cost overruns, they doubled, they tripled. And even those Kusile and Medupi are not yet functioning optimally. So now, that's about 14 years ago. The promises and deliverance are two different things. We need to promise and then be able to measure what we have delivered. If I look at this is a promise, it has not yet materialized. And then going back 14 years ago, we've been told that ESCOM will be the thing of the past. He's not the only one who has promised. Many before him had promised. But the problem is still lingering on. But I listen to the energy expert. They are saying we are still far from this crisis of load shedding.
So you're saying that light in the tunnel is an oncoming train here, beaming towards you?
Maybe towards the president, not the nation.
Are you not convinced, though, with regards, especially with this, the involvement of the private sector, going into renewables, building of a 14,000 kilometer renewable energy? Is that not a sign that there's better to come?
We are not trying to say there is nothing that is being done. But at the end of the day, I think we measure some things better on results. And also we can measure on the past promises. I don't think there is much confidence within the public because they've been sitting with a load shedding problem for over 14 years. And so many billions of rands of taxpayers have been spent on this. Even currently, these billions that are being spent, but perhaps it's positive that the private sector is coming into play so that the monopoly of ESCOM comes to an end. And perhaps maybe there could be a security of energy supply. I don't know. Seriously speaking, if I look at the numbers, at the moment, they're not telling me, playing 7,000 hours of load shedding last year. Let me also say this. Last year, if you look at from 2014 all the way to 2022, if you combine all those years, the number of hours of load shedding are far lesser than what we experienced last year. Was the worst last year. And the energy analysts are saying we are in for even deeper.
We shall see. And as you know, 3 most loaded words in politics. Veli, thank you very much indeed for your time.
Thank you so much, Blake.
Appreciate it. All right, that was Veli. He's from our SABC News Research Department. Important points indeed. Now to this, from the dry taps and sharing water from a stream with animals, to poverty, fighting poverty, through education amid the struggle of getting funding. This story by our producer Cleopatra Jones lays bare the lived experience of people in Ekwebeni in the Eastern Cape. Have a look.
A forgotten corner of Port St. John's. Eqebeni taps have been running dry for the past 7 years. And for these residents, this dirty stream is their only source of water.
Sisela nenkomo, nedonki, namahagu yonke into. Siye sithi ke xa sibona uba angena amanzi amdaka kakhulu phasi khona esigongweni, siphinde siguntywe udaka silukhuphele ngaphandle.
25-year-old Solam Tambeki is unemployed and has been taking care of her 6 siblings after her parents died. She relies on their social grant to put food on the table. Sometimes the food runs out.
Lo ndiye ndicele emthini or auntie. Kodwa ke xa ngibona uba ayikuyingcinyane ke ngoku thina sibadala ke singatyi siyekela abantwana. Uthi kuze wena?
She says she is grateful for the 350 social relief grant that she receives.
So incede ke sometimes 350 mayithe yangena kodwa ke ayingeni oko kum.
Another 25-year-old, Aluviwe Dambuza, is also among those bearing the brunt.
Hlala apha ekhaya siba 16. Siphila ngemali abantwana.
Aluviwe had to drop out of college because her mother could not afford fees.
But then ndibuyile since ungekho mali for rent okanye ukutya.
And then in SABC, did you apply?
Zange ndivumelwa ndireject.
Dambuza still yearns to pursue her teaching studies to help put food on the table.
Sorry. Ngase ngibona kukhona indlu nefurniture ngaphakathi. Sibukela i-TV kanjalo abanye abantwana.
Social Development says, until then, they're on the ground to help fight poverty in the province.
We always encourage people to come to our offices whenever there's a dire need, especially that relates to hunger and all the services that we provide as a department.
30 years on since the dawn of democracy, it seems the lived realities of Eqebeni residents have put a dash on Tintswalo's success story. The question is, will the new and renewed service delivery promises be fulfilled to the fullest this time around? For It's Topical, I am Cleopatra Jones, SABC News.
It's a touching story. The realities on the ground. Many thanks to Cleopatra Jones and Mangoba, our video journalist there. All right, let's get straight into our conversation. To what extent does the story of Tintswalo resonate with you? Is it a matter of perspective as well? We will discuss. My guest tonight, Professor Susan Booysen, political analyst, as well as Maudi Lentsoane, development economist. Thank you to both of you for joining us. A digital audience here as well. Good to have you on the program. Please put up your hands if you have any comments, any questions for our guests. We'll get straight into it. Professor Booysen, to you. Substance, concrete plans, as well as being aspirational. I guess that's ingredients of a sound State of the Nation address. From your account, in terms of the president, did he strike a good balance, or was that recipe a flop?
There were hints of balance here and there. But overall, there was much more history than present and especially future. And in State of the Nation address, one looks for as concrete as possible, given that there's limited time and a wide range of topics, but concrete as possible for the following year. And at least a few big announcements, especially with the policy gaps, the deficits, shortcomings in our policy, especially on the implementation front, are so gripping. One looks for, and I think one could very reasonably have expected, a few more concrete suggestions as to how to overcome the stagnation that we are experiencing at the moment. So yes, there was some balance, but definitely not enough, and not enough concrete.
Mr. Lentsoane, you would assume that economists like yourself, as well as investors, are looking for those concrete plans that Professor Booysen was talking about, as well as certainties. Did they get that?
Look, I think overall, and I think I watch quite closely how much naysayers we have. From my own observation, you know, as an economist, I really think that he did strike a balance. And I say to people, there is lack of appreciation, I think, just in terms of what kind of challenges this administration has been through over the past 5 years. Whether be it, you know, the fact that hardly 12 months, you know, into them in office, I think they were in office in May 2019. Hardly before 12 months ended, you know, there was COVID-19. How we navigated and how this administration took us through that particular crisis, pandemic, which was a global pandemic where nobody could have ever anticipated it, and how they've managed to navigate those muddy waters to get us to this point where I think when you look at the figures, we've got now more people in employment than we had before COVID. Even though the unemployment rate, of course, is still high. And I think when you look at how you interpret the unemployment rate, is the fact that there is more participation. And that participation should tell you that people now believe that they can find a job. That is why they would come in and participate in numbers. So we've got less discouraged workers. There is a bit of light. Right. And I think there are a number of others, of course, we can talk about the energy, how they're resolving the energy crisis, and a number of others. But I think overall, I'm fairly impressed in how they've navigated those terrain.
Prof, how do you strike a balance of being optimistic and being realistic, especially in an election year?
That is the million-dollar question, because we really see there is so much generalization, so many issues that were addressed, but more critically, for example, crime, unemployment, more critically last year than they were this year. And it doesn't strike a good chord with people out there, although one can assume that the speech is probably very carefully researched in terms of what the strengths are that the ANC observes in its own following on the ground. But there are so many of these little gaps and just points that should have been attended to much better, because we're not in that age of political innocence anymore. We're not in the age where political parties, including the ANC, can go into communities and say, we didn't know that this is how you actually lived. And so people are rightly asking very critical questions as to how do these building blocks of policies, strategies, visions, 20, 30-year plans, all the plans, how do they come together, and why was there not more attention to those big gaping gaps between the little building blocks to what President Ramaphosa referred to as a silent revolution? Right. And I think that is what they really try to get across, that so much had changed in the 30 years, and contrast them in the election year with the apartheid regime and antecedent. Right. But because we are beyond this age of political innocence, it is meeting with a far more critical audience than I think the ANC and ANC government and president had envisaged.
Well, what about the issue or the story of Tintswalo, Maudi? How do you think it landed? Was it a hit or a miss?
Oh, look, I think the story of Tintswalo, it's a fact. It's a factual one. I mean, I could easily say I'm a Tintswalo, personally. You know, having come from a village, that's the village of Kamarishani, no opportunities whatsoever. Came through the tertiary institution, through TEFSA, what they call TEFSA, now they call it NFSAS. I'm a beneficiary of that. And I've, you know, granted, there are many within my class, 1998, when I matriculated. There are some who did not quite make it. But the story of Tintswalo is a factual one, and we cannot deny that. But I think what the president tries to do is to paint a realistic picture and say, not only do we have Tintswalos, but we also have other Tintswalos that are quite correctly so, challenged. And we need to say, how do we then get those other Tintswalos that are still living through abject poverty to the level where these other Tintswalos are at? We cannot dismiss it. It's a factual fact.
Right. Well, we have a Tintswalo on our digital audience with us tonight. Tintswalo Chauke is a part of our audience. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. Did the story of Tintswalo resonate with you? Go on.
Please pardon me.
Go on, Tintswalo.
Thank you so much for having me. Honestly speaking, the story of Tintswalo did not resonate with me, given the circumstances that I've had to endure throughout. I was born and raised in Hammanskraal, in a township called Stinkwater, which loosely translates to stinking water. So we've had challenges with water from the time the community was established till today. And we've had outbreaks of cholera from as late as last year, whereby more than 20 people lost their lives. And as a result, I find it so hard for me to resonate with what the president was saying during the State of the Nation address. And also, I am an electrical engineering graduate who has been unemployed for quite some time.
Right, go on.
So it's very hard for me to say that what the president was saying is my reality, because it's totally different from the reality that I've had to endure throughout.
Right. Jody, is it a matter of perspective, a point of view, a lived experience, if or whether Tintswalo's story resonates?
Hi, good evening. Tintswalo's story does resonate, right? At that State of the Nation, we know that there were two distinct portions. One part of the State of the Nation sought to address progress over a calendar year, and the other was to commemorate 30 years of democracy, to look at the cumulative strides that have been made. So the story was not actually meant to be indicative of the lived experience of every single person since the dawn of democracy. It was symbolic, it was looking at our highest values as a society, it was illuminating the peak economic, political, social achievements. It was not tone deaf, it was not meant to downplay the struggle South Africans face. So we can surely walk and chew gum at the same time. So that, I think that was a really compelling story that the president told, and I have to commend him. And at a minimum, everyone has benefited from at least one part of the tale of the story, in that we are all governed by the Constitution. All of our rights have been enshrined, so everybody should, to some degree, be able to identify. And as a colored person myself, born in the 1980s, the course of my life would have been vastly different had it not been for that Constitution, had it not been for the ANC. So I want to say it definitely resonates with me, but I don't deny that people are really struggling at the moment.
Right. Professor Booysen, the mixed reactions to the story, what do you put that down to in terms of how South Africa views this?
Well, it clearly speaks to the different dimensions of our experiences. Yes, nobody is denying that there have been big changes. The Constitution played a big role in it, gave so many guarantees, and gave stepping stones, a building block towards enjoyment of better rights. But that is not a debate that we're having now. And that is not what the State of the Nation was supposed to be about. It is about what has government done in the last year, how has it taken forward its undertakings of a year ago, and what does it plan to do especially in the next year, but obviously also with a longer term there. And yes, it's fair to bring history and a broader context in here and there, but yes, this was the election year State of the Nation address. And we must bear in mind that in May this year, no, not in May, probably in June. Election will be probably in May. We still have to get the date. Probably in June this year, there will be another State of the Nation address. And that should be more concrete. There is much more, by definition, scope for those concrete undertakings. Although, given that this is a routine State of the Nation address, there must have been more realism, more recognition of the problems that are undermining each of these wonderful things that Tintswalo is experiencing.
And one of the issues that is definitely undermining the progress that South Africa has made is the issue of load shedding. And from what you heard the president talk about, saying that load shedding, the end of load shedding is within reach, then you get hit with stage 4, we're currently sitting on stage 5. But from what I heard the Minister of Electricity saying, that it's short-term pain for long-term gain. There are mechanisms in place, but it's so frustrating when you don't have power for 4.5 hours more. How do you grapple with that?
Absolutely. I think it's an open secret that one of the biggest challenges that we've faced as an economy is the issue of Eskom. But one cannot sit and say there was nothing, or there's been nothing, I think, being done. You just look at what happened in the past, for example, year alone, with the appointment of the energy or the electricity minister, and the work that has been, I think, that he has been doing there. And also a number of other issues, including the opening up, the introduction of the renewable energy, the IPPs, those coming into the grid. Those are giving us a clear direction that the future does not look as dark as we would like to be made to believe.
Right.
There is certainly light at the end of the tunnel. Whether we can agree whether it's 6 months down the line or it's 12 months down the line, it's debatable, but it is certainly work being done. And there's a realization that, of course, the energy crisis has to be resolved.
Let's go to a digital audience. Utando, your thoughts? Utando, if you can unmute.
Thanks for the opportunity, and good evening, everyone. You can hear me, right?
Yes, go ahead. Yes, we can hear you, Utando.
Hello, can you hear me now?
Go on.
Thank you so much for that. So, in regards to Tintswalo, I feel like usually the ANC is really created using quotes from Nelson Mandela, and we're trying something new, which is to be appreciated, but it did not land well at the end of the day. Tintswalo was marked as democracy's child, when in reality, she was actually the ANC's ideal child, even having the meaning of gratitude and peace. We are a critical audience, as Professor Booysen has pointed out as well. So we do know that we deserve a whole lot more than what we have at the moment. It just seems like a desperate romantic partner knowing that a breakup is about to come up and grasping at straws to remind you of the good moments when we're not actually living the good times right now.
Utando, thank you very much indeed. Zita, let's hear from you.
No, thank you very much, Blaine. Can you hear me there?
Yes, go on.
Yes. Let me try to paint a picture of Tintswalo, which President is talking about. This Tintswalo is talking about, I happen to believe that Tintswalo is a Tsonga Changani speaking person. I happen to believe that this Tintswalo President is talking about, it's a lady coming from a village called Jimgalalome at Biani, the Pombo province. You know, this lady is talking about, which President happened to say it's a creme de la creme of the democracy. I happen to realize that the synopsis of the President is imprecise. Why? This Tintswalo we are talking about is the Tintswalo which, if she's not going to school, he happened to go to tech shop just to sit there and wait for the customers to buy so that she can ask to run for smoke. This Tintswalo we are talking about, it's a modern Tintswalo that you happen to think that load shedding, it's a lifestyle which one has to live with it. This Tintswalo we are talking about is the Tintswalo that you happen to think that if there is no enough supply of water, this is how democracy should be. I happen to believe that this Tintswalo we are talking about is not the real Tintswalo which the democracy is trying to bring it into table. Because when you understand here, Tintswalo which they are talking about, it does not tally with what the president is trying to decorate. Yes, of the situation now. People are living in a very predicament and confused because the Democrat is not offering them anything.
Yeah.
But when Tintswalo goes to school, you may happen to think that Tintswalo is going to school, but in the dilapidated buildings, whereby even the educators are fully knowledgeable or perplexed to say that they don't know how exactly what are they going to offer.
Right.
This Tintswalo am I talking about. Thank you very much.
All right, Zita. Let's hear from Lindo. Lindo, agree, disagree with Zita?
Yeah, I totally agree with Zita there. So, but for me, this Tintswalo story, it's a sugar-coated story for me. It's like a beautiful crafted story. So it does not reflect the true reflection of society, of the people in the township. people also in the rural areas. So where like the kids are still like using the pit toilets in school. So like imagine if it after like 30 years of democracy. So for me, it's just that it doesn't like reflect like the true like reflection of society in the township, also like in the rural areas.
Right. Lindo, thank you very much indeed. Mate, let's hear from you, and then we'll go to Ruhula. Mate, to you first.
Oh, okay. Good evening. To sum up the story of Tintswalo from my side, I can say one gets to be reminded of a famous writer called Ben Okri, when he said, to poison a nation, you poison their stories. So the story of Tintswalo ought to tell people that the ANC is doing so much, is doing something that deserves a second chance or another chance in the election. But I see it as political posturing because growing around a village called Ptiti in Malamlele in Limpopo, I've seen a few Tintswalos on my side. So I can say the story of Tintswalo is just for political posturing, and it doesn't serve the purpose to say the ANC has done a lot for people and then now they must vote for them. So there is still much to be done for the ANC to say they deserve another chance. So this story of Tintswalo is just political posturing and to drive a certain narrative from the president. Thank you.
Marta, thank you very much indeed. Political posturing, Rahula, do you agree?
Thank you very much for having me. I'd like to say, first of all, it was a very beautiful story told by the president. We can never take away from the work that the ANC has done since 1994 to alleviate poverty and to improve the lives of the previously disadvantaged. However, fast forward to 2024, yesterday, Tintswalo woke up to stage 6 load shedding, which was funny enough announced in the middle of the night while she was sleeping. Only a couple of days after the president told her and the rest of the country that load shedding is fine, the end of load shedding is finally in sight in his SONA speech. And because of load shedding, her company where she works, Tintswalo could be facing possible retrenchment because the company can't work efficiently anymore due to load shedding, which means she's then going to join the millions of other South Africans out there who are unemployed due to load shedding.
Right.
That's the reality of today's Tintswalo. Unfortunately, the president's Tintswalo lives in the president's imaginary South Africa where everything is perfect. We live in a South Africa with bullet trains, smart cities, and public hospitals that are so good that people, medical aid, want to be treated there instead of private hospitals. So in my opinion, I think Tintswalo is just ANC's elections campaign strategy, which actually they decided to launch it during SONA. And let me end by saying this, Blaine. Tintswalo is not the win that the ANC thinks is, because all those benefits that she has received, they are not privileges that need to credit ANC, but those are basic human rights that she's entitled to in terms of the Constitution of the Republic of South Africa.
All right, thank you very much indeed. Before we go to a break, I just want to pick it up with you, Professor. From what was said now, the past SONAs. Back in 2018, we heard words like Ramaphosa and the New Dawn. How has that tone and tenor as well as sentiment on the ground changed given the current economic and political realities?
It has changed so dramatically. I don't think I think few people in 2018, 2019 envisaged that the ground would change that much so fast under the feet of a president and president of the ANC who then who had support ratings then that was way higher than that of the ANC, and now it is kind of way down, although quite high still in a rating of political leadership in South Africa altogether. But a lot of experience had come in these years in between, and South Africans learned the hard way that the delivery by the ANC government is not just in the president, it is in a government system that has taken shape, and it is in the political party that has been delivering and continues to deliver certain kinds of leadership. And people also came to experience how the state, it's not accurate to say a failed state, but it's a weak state in so many respects. One can think informal economy, little control over the economy, crime, etc., alternative worlds of business empires, and not to mention the business mafias. Right. But so there are alternatives world there that coexist parallel to the ANC and the government that they're talking about. Yeah. And people experience the adverse effects of that day to day, where they also have to take care of their own security, often of their own health systems, where public health systems deliver some parts, but not often very effectively. So people have been living 5 years of adverse politics, adverse social life, and that is coming to bear. And not to mention, one has to mention Pala. Yes. And so Cyril Ramaphosa as president is viewed with so much more cynicism personally than he was a few years ago.
Mr. Lentsoane, the external factors, if one would put it that way, such as the COVID-19 pandemic, floods in KwaZulu-Natal, for instance, to an extent the unrest in July, to what extent, in terms of the expectation, the goal initially was to revive the economy and job creations, to what extent does those external factors absolve the president?
Yeah. Look, they certainly do. And I just want to make this statement and say, I think probably Cyril Ramaphosa is one of the presidents that took over from a country in a worse state than any of the past presidents, right? Coming in, he took over the country that was deep in a state capture, badly looted, so many bad things that have taken place prior. He took over, and as I said, less than 12 months, he gets into his office, there's COVID-19. And then you mentioned other crises just before, after recovering from the COVID-19, there's the war in Ukraine and Russia. Right. Those are some of the external factors that not a single person could have actually anticipated, but he had to navigate them, deal with the July unrest as well. And you look at how they navigated them, I say it's commendable. We are back in a situation where the economy is recovering. In 2023 alone, also I think there is a mild growth in terms of jobs that have been created. We are back at the level where we were before COVID-19. So those are the numbers, and those numbers do not lie. When I talk about education, which is something that we've alluded to being a solution to our problems, the education, the matriculants of 2023, they've done exceptionally well. So there is positive things that are happening in this country, but of course, there's more that still has to be done. And for me, that's what I understood about the State of the Nation address.
Right, we're going to need to take a quick break. When we come back, I want to pursue other issues that were raised during the State of the Nation address. Also something that was touched on, the foreign policy of South Africa and the use of South Africa's foreign policy to pursue developmental goals. How is that being framed? More when we return. Tintswalo, such a beautiful name, right? Grace, mercy. And whether it hit or miss in terms of the analogy that the president used, we are talking about it. It's important to dig a little deeper and see how this story resonates with the ordinary people who are on the receiving end of either certain achievements or lack thereof in terms of service delivery, etc. Let's explore it as well. Professor Booysen, before we went to the break, I wanted to talk about the issue of foreign policy, and the president did mention this in terms of using South Africa's foreign policy in terms of developmental goals. And he said something interesting. He said, today every South African can hold their heads high, confident that we have assumed our rightful place on the world stage. We know about how some would see it as a success at the ICJ regarding the Gaza-Israel issue. But do you think South Africans care? Is it a strong election issue going forward?
I don't think it is a primary election issue, although it is very important for the government to have gained that kind of esteem international respect. Yes, South Africa has risen, I believe, somewhat in the international stakes, but in overall, that doesn't go very far in terms of putting food on table and creating jobs locally in South Africa.
Right.
And that is going to be the litmus test at the end of the day when it comes to elections.
Right. I just want to hear, we went out to get your voice on this issue. It's our regular Word on the Street feature. Took to various streets of Gauteng seeking diverse insights as well as perspectives on the recent State of the Nation address delivered by President Cyril Ramaphosa. And this is what you had to say. Take a look.
It's promises after promises after promises and things that never materialized. I mean, how on earth do you say you are fixing what? I mean, who messed up what? When? So it's all the 30 years down the drain, unfortunately.
As he promised that they will create a job. So let's just be patient, because hence we must remember that President Cyril Ramaphosa came on the time of COVID and it was bad. The country was facing a very big challenge. So for now, let's just give him a chance.
I was preferring him to tell us about the immigration of the lot of immigration people that are in this country. But I never heard about that, and I never heard what he's going to do about this.
He had to drag us back to 1994 to tell us, because nothing happened during his era, in his first 5 years.
The employment that he promised last time, it was those teacher assistant work. People are not working. It's just contract. The learnership is like the contract, little bit of contract, and people are working just to add on what he did for the country.
It's just a campaign. After on April, they are campaigning for that.
Unemployment on top of mind of many, and I just want to reflect what the President did say in the State of the Nation address with regards to youth unemployment, presidential employment stimulus. And he said through this program, they have created more than 1.7 million work and livelihood opportunities. Maudi, some would argue that there's a big difference between job opportunities and actual jobs.
Yeah. No, it's true. I mean, But I think when you look at the current situation, we've talked about this at length in the past. One of the biggest problems that we face as an economy is that in terms of the skill set that we are generating and what the job market is demanding, there is a mismatch. It is something that has to be tackled. So you've got a structural unemployment. Where unless we begin to say what is the skill set that we need as an economy and begin to encourage and generate more of that skill set to be absorbed automatically in numbers by the job market, we're never going to make a dent. If we continue to have matriculants who come in long queues in taking up courses that are not relevant, and perhaps we need to obviously say, is there enough career guidance to guide these learners to be able to take courses that will be needed and absorbed by this economy. Until we do that, and we need to do that as urgent as possible so that we can begin to see progress.
Hands up on our digital audience screen. Jody.
Hi, it seems there's been a retelling of Tintswalo's story to accommodate, the current issues that we have about load shedding and, jobs. But I can talk about the alternative. The alternative in 1994 was the DA, or then the DP, and all the increased privatization that would have occurred. People like Tintswalo would have had little to no support from the government. Tintswalo's mother would have been told that, she needed to work harder, not be lazy. There was no reason that she couldn't get a job. And the course of that child's life would have been vastly different to the story we heard the other evening. So, we need to consider what the alternatives are. It's fine to criticize, but what are the alternatives? What do you propose? So I think that at this point, there's nothing wrong with incremental progress. And that is the course that we're on. So it will take, we're only 30 years into our democracy. It's going to take some time.
Yeah. Tintswalo Chauke, do you think that your name was misused, or do you understand the intention?
I understand the intention that the president had when he narrated that story, but unfortunately, it's a story that most people in South Africa cannot resonate with, especially the born-frees like myself. And as much as it was supposed to be a story of hope, a story that was supposed to bring hope and change into people's life and to make people look at our economy in a different perspective, unfortunately, it's something that we cannot resonate with.
Utando?
Thank you once again. So I do hear what Jody is saying in regards to that the change will take time, but I do wonder if ANC has probably lost its momentum. The reason we do have the opportunity to vote every 5 years and we have a new state leader every 2 terms is to give us the opportunity to consider if we want to continue or if we want to try something new. They have been there for quite a while and they've gotten comfortable, which is why they're out of touch with the realities of their people. So I do pose the question, has ANC lost its momentum?
Emmanuel, my apologies, I didn't get to you yet. Please give us your thoughts. If you can unmute, Emmanuel. Oops. Okay, I think Emmanuel is frozen just as you wanted to get to him. Let's take Rahula.
Can you hear me?
Yes, loud and clear. Go ahead.
You touched on the issue of foreign policy. Unfortunately, you didn't explain it, but I just wanted to say on that issue, I feel like it's the president was trying to appease worried South Africans since the against Israel, because it's being said that our image might have tainted within the international community. In fact, I did read an article this morning saying that the ESA is tabling a bill to review relations with South Africa. So that part of the SONA speech was important in order to assure the international community that South Africa has to open for trade internationally.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much indeed for your time. Unfortunately, Emmanuel, we couldn't get to you. Your line kept on freezing, but no doubt we'll try to get you. Let me try one more time. Just a brief thought from you, Emmanuel. I know I'm going to get it from the control room. But final thoughts from you, Emmanuel? Okay, it seems that we're having a problem. But thank you very much indeed, Professor. Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Lentsoane. Value added. No doubt it's a conversation that we will take into the elections and we will see how this all develops in terms of the plans that the President outlined. Thank you very much indeed for your time. All right, before we go, here's my take. Tintswalo grew up in a society that was worlds apart from the South Africa of her parents, grandparents, and great-grandparents. And this line from the State of the Nation address will no doubt resonate with many people in South Africa, and for different reasons, right? Perspective matters. How does the past 30 years look from your point of view? Because as the President also admitted, despite the achievements, many of democracy's children still face great challenges. So your lived experience will no doubt shape the way you consider the story of Tintswalo. Are we fully benefiting from the policies of a democratic state? And if not, why? It is in the answering of this simple question that will help us to get to a better place as a nation, right? We need clear timelines. We need commitment from our leaders and consistency in doing the right thing. A quote from Denzel Washington rings in my head now. Without commitment, you'll never start. But more importantly, without consistency, you'll never finish. And that's my take. If you missed anything on this program, be sure to watch this episode of Topical on YouTube. Sports Live up next. If you're watching a repeat of this program, then as always, the news continues. Until next week, my brothers and sisters, take care. Bye-bye.